button. Okay. And thank you all for clicking whatever buttons Zoom asks you to click. And as I mentioned before, feel free to leave your videos on if you like, turn your videos off. If you want to remain seated where you are, that's absolutely fine. Some people like to lay down for their meditation. Some people like to stand up for their meditation. The great thing about mindfulness is you cannot do it wrong. And bringing some movement to your body, perhaps wiggling your fingers and your toes, maybe gently rocking side to side, finding a comfortable posture, finding a posture that feels relaxed and also alert. And you may wish to close your eyes or soften your gaze or lower your gaze. And as we're all arriving in this shared space together, in this Zoom room, I invite you to notice what is here to be noticed. Perhaps you have some thoughts, some remnants of the day, maybe some stories in your mind. And just noticing, no need to fix, no need to change. Or perhaps you have some emotions that are present. And just noticing, bringing awareness to those feelings. And perhaps you have some sensations in your body that you're noticing. Maybe some sore muscles, maybe some places in your body that feel numb or itchy or hot or cold. And just noticing what it's like to have sensations. And now I invite you, if you wish, to take your awareness, your attention, and place it on your breath. Noticing what it feels like in your body to breathe. Actually feeling into the sensations of breath. And perhaps you feel your breath the most in your chest. The rising and the falling away of the inhale and the exhale. Or perhaps you feel your breath the most in your belly. Or maybe you feel your breath the most in your throat or just outside your nostrils. Just resting your awareness at that place in your body where you feel your breath the most, or where your breath feels the most pleasant. And if your mind starts to wander, that's okay. You're not doing anything wrong. In fact, you're doing the practice just right, exactly right. The moment we realize that our mind has wandered, that is the moment of mindfulness. That is the practice. And in that moment of awareness, we have choice. Do I want to stay with the story? Which is okay. There's nothing wrong with staying with the story. Or do I want to return to this present moment? And if you wish, I invite you to return to your breath, which is such a reliable anchor to this present moment. And using the awareness of the breath as your anchor to this present moment, and noticing this breath right here. Letting go of your control of the breath. No need to change or manipulate the breath in any way. Trusting the wisdom of your body to breathe just right. It's almost as though our body is breathing us. Breathing in, breathing out, right here in this moment. And if your mind starts to wander, that's absolutely fine. You're not doing anything wrong. Our mind is like a little puppy or a little kitten, always wandering, always wondering, always exploring. And we don't need to get mad at the puppy or yell at the kitten, but gently, kindly bring the little puppy, the little kitten, back to the center. And we can always bring our awareness and our attention back to this present moment. And just noticing what it's like to breathe in this human body in this moment, right now. And noticing what this moment is like. And noticing what this moment is like. And noticing what this moment is like. And in a few moments, you'll hear the sound of 3 bells signaling the end of this sit. And I invite you to see if you can maintain this connection to the present moment. We all have so many reliable anchors to this present moment and our present experience. Our breath, the sensations of our feet against the earth, our body against a chair or a cushion, the sounds happening around us, the thoughts we're having, like clouds in the sky, our emotions, our sensations. So many different anchors to this present moment. And of course, our minds will get pulled away into the future, into the past, into stories, into fantasy. And that's okay. And when we realize that our mind has wandered, that is the moment of mindfulness. And in these moments, we have choice. What do I want to do with this precious present moment? And the good news is you can't do it wrong. And I'll also end with a short poem by Catherine Pierce titled Planet. This morning, this planet is covered by winds and blue. This morning, this planet glows with dustless, perfect light, enough that I can see 1 million sharp leaves from where I stand. I walk on this planet, its hard-packed dirt and prickling glass, and I don't fall off. I come down soft if I choose, hard if I choose. I never float away. Bong. 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 And I invite you to bring some gentle movement to your bodies, perhaps wiggling your fingers and your toes, maybe rocking side to side, maybe a gentle bend or a turn or a twist, moving your body in whatever way feels right for you. And when you're ready, you can blink your eyes or open your eyes. And when you're ready, returning to this Zoom room together. Well, hello, everyone. I'm so glad that we all get to sit together. Sounds like Mr. Rogers there. I'm so glad that we're neighbors. I'm so glad. Won't you be my neighbor? But I am glad that we get to sit together. And maybe a theme of today will be about, well, certainly connection, but intimacy. And it's such an intimate thing to meditate with other people. Nobody ever told me that growing up, that meditation is a way to connect with other people. I always thought you had to talk to people to connect with them, but there's many ways to connect. Um, so now I am so excited. We have a very special, wait, let me also just remind everybody, for anybody who's joined, we are still the InsightLA Mindfulness and Deep Suffering Practice Group. We're a practice group, we're an affinity group. We include in this space, in this circle, not just, well, there's some topics that are certainly welcome in mindfulness communities, suffering, right? But there's also deep suffering of life, grief, hopelessness, disconnection, suicide, losing people to suicide, struggling with our own suicidality, the helplessness. So I'm so glad that InsightLA has supported this community for the past 3 years. Some people get scared at deep suffering. Ooh, don't talk about deep suffering. But I'm really glad that this is a space where I and others can show up and yeah, be honest about just how hard this life is and connect with other people. And today is very special, and we are celebrating our 3-year birthday this month. We've got some very special guests, and I am so glad Flynn Coleman. Oh my goodness, so excited. Flynn is absolutely amazing. I also I'm very lucky that we've been friends for many years, more than 20 years, long time. And also, oh my gosh, this is so great, y'all. Flynn came out with a book recently, which is so timely. And as we all know, everybody's talking about AI, this amazing book, A Human Algorithm. And Flynn is an amazing writer, international rights lawyer, advocate, social innovator. I think of you, Flynn, as a modern day philosopher, truly, truly, and which is really what we need right now in the world. And this is just an amazing book about how artificial intelligence is redefining who we are and how we see ourselves, each other. And I believe it was mentioned earlier in the check-ins about how we are so intensely and comprehensively connected via our stuff. But why is it that so many of us are feeling so lonely, so disconnected, so helpless, hopeless? I'm speaking for myself here. And so Flynn, thank you so much for, again, stepping into this space to talk about the connection between technology, AI, which everybody's talking about right now, and also the human piece. Anyways, thank you so much for being here, Flynn. You are awesome. And this isn't the coffee talking, you really are amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Speaking of tools that we can use for connection, I'm beaming into you from beautiful Florence, Italy. I would show you the beautiful view outside of the window, but the glare wouldn't be conducive to Zoom. And it's an honor to be here. As Brian said, I've known him a very long time. So I'm so excited to be in community and in conversation with you. And then just a slight little piece that I had already told Brian, the internet connection here is a little bit so-so. So if I look confused or if I didn't hear what you said, I have my other devices as backup. And so speaking of living the uncertainty, we'll work with what we've got, and I will beam into you some which way. And I am so excited to chat with you today.
Fantastic. And also I should tell everybody that we will be having this conversation all in Italian. There's no subtitles. So no, sorry. I wish. Prego? What's prego?
That's good. That's
Good.
the
Okay.
pasta sauce in the US, but here it means you're welcome. So it works.
Okay, prego. Beautiful. Fantastic. And so Flynn and I will talk for, I don't know, 25 minutes, thereabouts, 25 or so. And then my favorite part, and Flynn all told me that I think also her favorite part too, is turning off the recording, and then for us here having some questions and reflections and comments. And again, I'm really glad that we all get to be in community together. So Flynn, can I start by asking you a question? This amazing book, your amazing work, the time that you've spent thinking about these topics. And now I know that you're going all over the world, both physically and also over Zoom, and people all over the world are like wanting to talk to you about what's happening. So I guess my first question for you is, which I've been wanting to ask somebody, not just what the news is telling us, but being part of discussions. What are people really asking you about AI? What are people really interested in? Because again, you're all over the world in conversation. What is really on people's minds about this potentially this new period that we're entering into?
It's a beautiful question, I think, for a lot of reasons. And one of which is that so much of what's happening with AI, artificial intelligence, today is happening in a very homogenous group of people, a very small group of people building the future we're all going to be living in. And so I love this question because it really speaks to what people want to know about, what people intuitively understand that we need to know more about. And very, very importantly, and why I wrote the book and why I do what I do, which is that we should all have a voice in the future that's being built for all of us. So on the one hand, AI is a technology like any other tool we've been building and using since the beginning of human history, right? Fire is technology, celestial navigation is technology, irrigation is technology. But at the same time, the idea of a technology that is intelligent, potentially smarter than we are could ever be, is of course incredibly overwhelming and can be incredibly complex. So the idea that we really need to think about what people are thinking about and how to provide access to so many more people really helps us understand that one of the scariest aspects is that this is being built by such a small group of people, and yet it's going to determine so much of what the future of technology holds. So part of why I wrote the book, and now the book is several years old, which means the research was many years before that, and I've been working at the intersection of human rights and humanity and technology for many years, is to provide a more human perspective and to provide a book that's not just informative, but hopefully also inspiring and for everyone, and to tell us that we should all have a seat at the table and to design to help us understand that we should all be a part of this. People are asking a lot of questions about what actually is this? What can it do for my community, my family, my school, my institution? Is it already too late to institute changes to make this more equitable and to make it better for, for example, the next generation and how they're living all of their lives online? People want to know about the dangers. They want to know what it has to do even with human rights. They want to understand, what this is going to change and how fast. And I think one of kind of the threshold questions when we think about AI, and there's so much there, and another reason, I get asked to speak about this is that it's such a broad conundrum, but yet it tends to be focused very much on the programming, the coding, and the idea that there's only a few of us that can understand this and build this. But the truth is, it's going to take all of us to build a brighter future with AI. And so I wanted to bring that human perspective to the work and to help us understand that, yes, it's changing everything, but at the same time, we can all have a voice in the future that's being built for all of us. And so people are asking all types of questions. A lot of them are filled with fear and anxiety. And I do get, I'm known to be the person that's brought in to bring some optimism, which of course we will do, but it's also, I think, really relevant to our group and to society writ large, that if we're not feeling anxious and confused and uncertain, then we're not paying attention, because there's, on the individual level, figuring these things out, but collectively things are changing so fast. And so really the main big difference with a technology like AI is that for many of our tools, we would have many, many years to assimilate with our technology, right? So the human mind has been evolving alongside our tools and technologies since the beginning of human history. But the span of time we've had to assimilate has traditionally been much longer. And the trajectory of technology is such that with AI, our brains are not able to keep up, let alone our laws, our policies, our institutions. Our mind, these magnificent, perhaps the most complex and magnificent biological thing that has ever, been on this earth, is still very unknown to us. And it's still going to take a long time. And so the issue is the acceleration of these tools is so fast that in every sense of the word, we're not keeping up. And I think that's at the heart of things. People feel like, how do I keep up? And how do I live in a world that's changing so fast? It's both incredibly new and the most ancient question we've asked ourselves ever.
Wow, it's really amazing. I mean, it's exciting and scary. Well, it's exciting. And with that excitement, there's, yeah, trepidation and, and I love in your book, when this metaphor of a forest and a map, and something that I didn't think about until right now, and when you were with what you just said, is this idea that we have the map of, some people think of, like, as you say in your book, a map in a forest, right? Like, we need a map to make our way out of the forest. But you say, well, maybe that's not the only way to look at this, a metaphor for this, but instead we need a map, and we are about to enter the forest of AI. And again, it's happening, right? People have access now to Chat GPT and all these things. So, but what I hadn't thought of until right now, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit, definitely about deep suffering, right? Is that if we don't have a map before we all descend, before we all enter into this vast forest, if we don't have a map, not only are we likely to be lost in terms of why we're entering the forest in the first place, but without a map before we enter the forest, we're just as likely to lose each other. We're likely to end up sort of using this metaphor, wandering the forest alone, maybe bumping into each other. But I'm concerned, and I know we all are, that they're perhaps entering into this forest of AI and this new technology could lead to, for some of us, more disconnection, more isolation, more solitude, being lost in the forest. So yeah, I love this metaphor, because none of us want to feel lost. It's one of the feeling helpless. It's one of the worst things. Some of us would rather feel guilty than feel helpless and lost. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this idea of a map and how important it is for us to have a map before we descend into the forest of AI, if I am understanding the metaphor correctly.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, that is in the final chapter of the book. I do talk a lot about this metaphor of how we tend to think of our lives or the trajectory of our futures individually or collectively as getting out of some type of metaphorical forest. And I suggest that instead, perhaps what we're looking for is a map for how to go deeper and how to go into the forest. And I love how you also added into the forest, but not alone, but together. and that individually we are so small and perhaps so lost, but together there's no star we can't dream of exploring, and there's no forest we can't traverse. So I love what you added there. And I think that there are so many facsimiles to deep suffering, to creativity, which is, of course, an enormous theme of the book. I get into combinatorial creativity, taking cues from people like Leonardo da Vinci, who worked right here where I'm sitting now, Ada Lovelace, Alan Turing, and others. And so the idea that it's beautiful what you said, because it's the idea that life, in a sense, it's funny because what you said about we don't want to feel lost, but life is uncertainty. And that is the only thing we can guarantee, is that change and that uncertainty, which is why Rainer Maria Rilke's quote, "Live the questions," is also so important. And this forest metaphor has to do with, it's so uncertain. And the forest can feel dark and deep, but together we can traverse it. And in a way, to understand we're lost is also to find a path to being found. Perhaps not all the answers, but among each other and among the connections that we can't find, as we're all dealing with these enormous, unfathomable questions, in a sense. And so, as you said, there's this idea of disconnection and isolation, and we're all feeling it. And atomization. I'm working on a new piece of writing now about this modern world that we live in, that is over personalized and over customized, and as a result we all live in those cubicles, not unlike the great TV show, if anyone has seen Severance, about how modern life was supposed to liberate us, and instead the internet, the promise of the internet was the promise of Facebook, connect with anyone around the world. And so the first thing to say about that is that the disconnection and alienation and isolation we're feeling is very real, and the data is starting to back up the effects of social media, the effects of an algorithmic overlord that is dictating our choices. And that is the bad news. And the good news is that we have to remember that things didn't have to be built this way. And we didn't have to build an internet this way. And so while things feel dire, it also means we have within us the capability to traverse that forest, to build a different type of tool, a different type of algorithm, a different type of institution. And so that, wrapped up in that, is how we're lost and how we're found. And I think the disconnection we feel is so interesting because the world has always been deeply intertwined, and now more intertwined than ever. In theory, the internet could have been a vast Alexandria's library where everyone has a library card. What happened? And I and others have some answers to that. And it's not just about the algorithms, it's who gets to build them. Which ones are funded? How is this working within a very specific capitalist system that focuses on the global north and on the Western system and on some colonial notions, of who gets to decide our future? And because a lot of these, and by a lot, I mean, there's very few technology companies deciding the future, it's incredibly homogenous, the demographic building these tools, and the mindset behind what is essentially a quasi-kingdom of feudal overlords deploying algorithms. And so that is the bad news. But the good news is that there is also brilliance all around us. I'm glad you opened with the forest metaphor, because the secret agenda of the book really has to do with things like octopus intelligence and the vast panoply of brilliance all around us. And how about rethinking the very idea of what it means to be intelligent, and that there are so many different types of brilliance and intelligence. I mean, what you're building here with this community, and thinking about our hearts and thinking about being mindful. I mean, there are so many ways to have moral and social imagination. And at the end of the day, that kindness, that compassion is how we traverse the forest, and looking all around us. Like you just taught us in the meditation, what are we hearing? What are we sensing? We are all here on this pale blue dot floating in a vast cosmos. And it's a vast, infinite universe that I personally can feel my brain can't possibly comprehend. But we have each other at the same time, and maybe that's enough.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm so glad that you are doing what you're doing. For those of us that care deeply, but well, it just takes so much. And again, you're all your whole life and everything you've been doing and working on supporting people all over the world, whether it be in human rights violations and advocacy and speaking and writing. And exactly like you said, this is a world where we're wired for connection, in a world of impermanence, right? We're wired for connection. We need each other in a world where everything is fleeting and all living things die,
Mhm.
which sucks. And I'm glad that we can keep reminding each other that, like you said, even though that things end or things change, we still have each other and connection. And if deep suffering is and suffering in silence, right? Suffering in silence. If so much of the deepest suffering has this element, like you said, of disconnection, then the answer, the medicine is connection, right? If deep suffering, the opposite of deep suffering is not no suffering. The opposite of deep suffering and disconnection is connection. And as a grief therapist, I'm really excited because for a long time we thought grief was linear. We thought it was like a assembly line. First you have your denial, and then you have your anger, and then you have your bargaining. But now we know that, and we've always known, and now we can say it out loud in a full-throated way, that of course it's not like that. And I'm really glad that people come into spaces like this or into offices or talk with a pastor or a rabbi or an imam or a baseball coach or piano teacher and say, you know, when I'm playing this this Mahler piece, I'm thinking of my mom who died. Is that weird? And then the piano teacher will say, no, that's the opposite of weird. That's connection. That's beautiful. And likewise, we can continuing bonds theory is the new gold standard in grief. It's no longer the Kubler-Ross. It's the continuing bonds, which is how do we stay connected to the people that have died? How do we stay connected across the divide of life and death? And yes, perhaps someday AI can help us to, because we can write letters, and that's an activity that we do in grief therapy, but receiving letters from the people that are no longer living, maybe AI can help us with that. What would it be like to be in conversation and to be sitting with somebody who has died, but they still live? They've always lived in our hearts, but now they can also live on our computer. Anyways, uh, and I see we maybe just have time for maybe one more question, then we'll turn off the recording, and then we can have community here. Um, Flynn, how often do people ask you about the mental health, that's just one word, wellness, emotional health? How often do people talk to you about the therapeutic utility of AI? And also how often are you thinking about, yeah, how can AI help with the deepest of suffering, which we all go through, except we're not really supposed to talk about it in polite society. So how common is this, are these conversations and these topics been coming up for you recently?
There's so much in there. And this, of course, is literally one of life's, endless conversations about this intersection of grief and, of course, mental health, and now thinking about it with these tools, because this is something that touches all of our lives. As you said, this will touch all of us in myriad unexpected ways. And the thing I was thinking as you were saying too is that I love the idea of thinking about grief as love in another form. And when you described a new process for how we think about grief to continue those bonds, as opposed to some linear cycle that has the beginning and the middle and the end, I think that's so much more about what the waves of being human in a life feel like. And that roller coaster and that beautiful and heartbreaking adventure of disconnection and reconnecting and finding ways to be brave enough to keep the connection even when it feels like so much love but also so much hurt. And that, right, where you feel the pain is where you feel the joy. And I just really think that that's something that touches all of us. And so to answer your question about mental health and AI, I mean, there's so many possible pathways to what the future will hold about staying connected with loved ones, staying connected with ourselves, having someone to talk to, what it means to coexist in a world with machines that already have the capacity to speak to us, which is part of why things like Chat GPT get a lot of news coverage, because it's one of the first public iterations of something we can interact with, all of us, with natural language. And that's why, these tools that a lot of us have been talking about have suddenly become this public forum. And, someone else had hinted when we were saying hello to each other at the beginning that it's terrifying, but it also holds a lot of promise. There's a lot of discussion, I have it in my book, others do, about the potential and pitfalls of AI in medicine, where it could help us detect breast cancer, but where it falls short at the same time, relying on it too much. And so for me, in the book, but also generally, I think it's so, the robot Terminator armies that are going to take over all of us is a sci-fi version of things, or that it's going to save all of us. We tend to think in a very binary way. And one main theme of my book and my life, and I think of life, is that it's all on a spectrum. And it's neither going to save us all or probably not be the Terminator robot army iteration. It's where's that nuance in the messy middle, which is so much of what life is about too. And it's the answer, like any answer, is it's going to be what we make of it. And an algorithm or a tool, technology, AI is the tool, but behind that are people and communities and companies and corporations and laws and policies. And the future, one thing that can be very helpful to think about is we have all of these possible futures. And how do we think about building a path towards the one that will let us be the most human and the most brave and the most alive in all of its pain and majesty and brilliance and fallibility? And this is something that comes up a lot. And we're starting to now have the computing power to build these things. So, and we also have, Black Mirror on Netflix talking about the future of, what these tools are going to look like. And I actually think sci-fi and literature and poetry and music and film has so much to teach us about the future. In fact, some technology companies hire sci-fi writers to help them imagine the future. And this is a huge topic, and it has so much has so much potential to help surgeons, to help mental health professionals, to aggregate data, to go through the scientific journals that a single physician therapist could never go through in their entire lifetime. At the same time, there's danger in aggregating people's data or in trying to predict someone's mental health issues without actually having that case-by-case human interaction. So I actually think this is a field where the rubber's really hitting the road, because it's not just academic. This is our lives. This is our families and our communities. This is our health. And so it's a place where we have to get it right. And so the promise lies in all of us finding ways to be involved and using our deep suffering and our experience to be a voice for that future of technology. Where can we play a role? And it's not just in being a coder or a programmer. It's in the funding mechanisms. It's in coming together as groups. It's, running for school board. It's in thinking about changing laws and policies. It's in having stopgaps and ethical guardrails and regulations while we figure this out, like they're doing with CRISPR. There's historical examples, the Atomic Energy Commission, chemical weapons bans. How do we create those guardrails, because we don't know the answers, until we can catch up with the science, with each other, and building these institutions. So I think this is really a critical piece of the puzzle. And what if we could find a way to think about these tools as ways to stay connected with each other and loved ones? There's promise there, but at the end of the day, it's a philosophical question. Because one of the things I was thinking about in preparing for discussing with you is that the idea of connecting with loved ones, past and with us, is incredibly important, but there's no band-aid to these types of things. And I think what becomes dangerous is when we use technology or a tool as a fix, as opposed to doing the deep work that you do every day. Because for me, as much as I am a futurist and I have some background in predicting some of these things, I don't know the future. I don't know what's going to happen. My entire life's work in human rights and war crimes and that, international criminal justice system, essentially, I've chosen a field where I'm never going to win all the battles. There will always be another war. There will always be something else to fight. And we are never going to figure it out. And all of my life's work is essentially designed that I will never see the fruits of any of it. It will be for generations long in the future, and so in that way, it's picking yourself up every day when you fall down. and knowing that the work is never done. But I think it's so similar to what you're doing here, which is that I always say, we don't know what the future holds, but can we learn to treat each other better along the way, no matter what happens? Can we go down swinging with our fights, with our passion, with what we believe in, but can we learn to treat each other better no matter what happens? So for me, at the end of the day, that's what it is.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, and thank you. Really, it's like Ram Dass famously said, maybe we're all just walking each other home. And yeah, I mean the Buddha, when he was a little kid, his rich daddy made sure that everything around him was curated. Don't have any old people near him. Don't have anyone sick. Don't have anyone infirm. Don't have anyone who's ugly. And this life that, you know, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Let's fix it. But there is suffering in the world. There is grief. There are and the research is very clear now. Everyone thinks about suicide. It's a part of this human experience. We all think about our own death, our own mortality. I wonder what it would be like. We think. And so this forest that we're all about to move into, yeah, I don't want to lose each other. I don't want to lose myself. And it seems like this could be, as you said, a promised land potentially, but we got to get it right. And thanks for being on the front lines of this to advocate for not just the pocketbook or the sort of neck up kind of thing. You know, this is not just an intellectual exercise. This is our heart. This is our soul. This is yeah, the human piece. And again, I'm really glad that you're out there speaking for all of us that care, not just how much money can be made off this, but can this help us? Can this help us? Not fix us, but can this support us and bring us even closer together rather than pushing us farther and farther apart?
That's so beautifully said. Yeah. And again, just based on what you said, at the end of the day, can we stand with each other in our suffering? And I feel like, as is yours, the entire work of human rights or justice or equity or compassion is, can we bear witness to each other in all of our pain and in all of our joy and all of our failings and all of our promise? And to be seen, as you said, to be seen and to be heard for who we really are as individuals and as a species, all sharing this beautiful, fragile planet. Can we bear witness to each other at the end of the day? I think that's what it
Well,
is.
thank you, Flynn. And so now part one is coming to a close. I'll turn off the recording and now